When people think of Nazi concentration camps, names like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Treblinka come to mind, places where millions of men, women, and children were killed. But there was another camp, hidden in the forests of northern Germany, that few people outside history books ever hear about. It was called Ravensbrück, and it was built for one purpose: to imprison, torture, and destroy women. Ravensbrück wasn't just another Nazi camp. It was the only major concentration camp designed specifically for women, and it became a nightmare of pain, cruelty, and forgotten suffering. Over 130,000 women were imprisoned there between 1939 and 1945. Tens of thousands never left alive. The camp was located about 50 miles north of Berlin, near a quiet lake surrounded by trees. At first glance, it looked almost peaceful: neat rows of barracks, watchtowers, and fences. But inside those fences was a world of unimaginable horror. It began in May 1939, just months before the start of World War II. The first prisoners were mostly German women, political opponents of the Nazi regime, socialists, communists, and those who dared to speak out. But as the war expanded, so did the camp. Soon, women from across occupied Europe were sent there. Polish resistance fighters, French partisans, Soviet prisoners, Jewish women, Roma women, and even nuns and nurses accused of helping enemies of the Reich. Ravensbrück quickly became a place where the Nazis experimented not only with mass imprisonment, but with gendered cruelty. Women who were strong, educated, and brave, the kind of people who could inspire others to resist, were singled out for humiliation and torture. The women of Ravensbrück came from more than 30 countries. They spoke different languages, but they shared the same nightmare. Every day began with roll call at dawn, no matter the weather. Prisoners stood for hours in freezing cold or driving rain, while guards counted them, shouted orders, and beat those who faltered. Inside the barracks, the conditions were unbearable. Each wooden hut, built for a few hundred women, often held over 1,000. There was little food, mostly thin soup, scraps of bread, and black coffee made from roasted barley. Hunger was constant, disease was everywhere, and lice and fleas infested their bodies. At night, women lay squeezed together on straw mattresses, listening to the cries of the sick and the sound of boots outside, because no one ever knew who would be taken away next. Ravensbrück wasn't only a prison, it was also a place of forced labor. The Nazis turned the camp into a factory. Women were forced to sew uniforms for the German army, make parts for weapons, and work long hours in brutal conditions. The Siemens company even built a factory right next to the camp to take advantage of this free labor. Those who grew too weak to work were considered useless. And in the Nazi system, useless meant disposable. By 1942, Ravensbrück became part of the Nazi killing machine. Prisoners were executed by shooting, starvation, or lethal injection. Others were sent to gas chambers in Auschwitz or later to the small gas chamber built inside Ravensbrück itself. But one of the darkest chapters of Ravensbrück was what happened in its infirmary, the so-called hospital block. Here, Nazi doctors conducted horrifying medical experiments on prisoners. Dozens of Polish women, many of them members of the resistance, were chosen as test subjects. The Nazis called them Kaninchen, which means rabbits. They were forced to endure experiments meant to test new drugs and surgical techniques. Doctors cut into their legs and deliberately infected the wounds with bacteria, dirt, and even splinters of glass or wood. They were left to suffer for days, screaming in pain, while their injuries rotted and festered. Many died from infection or blood poisoning. Those who survived were often left crippled for life. All of it was done without anesthesia and without mercy. Some of these women, the rabbits of Ravensbrück, later became symbols of courage. Even as they suffered, they found ways to resist. They smuggled notes, kept secret diaries, and promised each other that if any of them survived, they would tell the world what had been done. In the face of such cruelty, the women of Ravensbrück showed extraordinary strength. They organized secret schools to teach children and each other. They shared what little food they had. They prayed together, sang songs, and cared for the sick. In a place built to destroy their humanity, they fought to keep it alive. There were heroes among them. Women like Olga Benario, a German communist, Germain Tillion, a French ethnologist, and Wanda Potawska, a Polish resistance fighter who later became a doctor. Many of these women continued to tell their stories long after the war, making sure Ravensbrück would not be forgotten. But for most, there was no happy ending. By 1945, as the war turned against Germany, conditions in the camp grew even worse. The Nazis began killing prisoners at a terrifying rate to cover up their crimes. Transports of women were sent to gas chambers or shot in the forest nearby. In the final months, Ravensbrück was overcrowded with evacuees from other camps. Typhus spread like wildfire. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Survivors later recalled stepping over corpses just to reach the latrine. In April 1945, as Soviet troops approached, the SS began evacuating the camp. Thousands of women were forced on death marches toward northern Germany. Anyone who collapsed was shot on the roadside. Those who remained behind faced starvation or execution. When Soviet forces finally liberated Ravensbrück on April 30th, 1945, they found only a few thousand survivors, skeletal, barely alive, too weak to even stand. The camp that had once echoed with the shouts of guards and the cries of prisoners fell silent. But its silence spoke volumes. In the years after the war, Ravensbrück was overshadowed by larger camps like Auschwitz and Buchenwald. It didn't fit the familiar image of Nazi cruelty, because it was a camp made for women. For decades, its victims were often left out of textbooks, their suffering hidden in the shadows of history. But their stories matter, because Ravensbrück wasn't just a women's camp. It was a reflection of how far hatred can go when power sees humanity as weakness. The Nazis didn't only try to destroy people by killing them. They tried to break their dignity, their compassion, and their identity. And yet, even in the darkest corners of that camp, women held on to each other. There were acts of defiance that the guards could never understand. A mother giving her bread to her daughter, a prisoner stealing medicine for a friend, women whispering prayers, writing poems, or holding hands as they faced death together. After the war, some of the survivors returned home, only to find their countries in ruins. Many kept silent for years, haunted by memories too painful to speak aloud. Others testified in war crime trials, helping to bring Nazi doctors and guards to justice. But Ravensbrück itself faded from memory. The site became part of East Germany under Soviet control. It was turned into a memorial, but for a long time, the focus was political rather than personal. Only in recent decades has the world begun to truly acknowledge what happened there. Today, if you visit Ravensbrück, you can still see the remains of the barracks, the watchtowers, and the crematorium. There's a museum and a memorial by the lake, a bronze sculpture of women standing together, holding each other up. It's called Burdened Women, and it captures the spirit of those who endured the unimaginable. The story of Ravensbrück is not just about death, it's about endurance. It reminds us that even in a world built on cruelty, courage can survive. The women of Ravensbrück were mothers, daughters, teachers, doctors, artists, and ordinary people. They didn't choose to be heroes, but history made them so. Their suffering is a warning. Their strength is a lesson. In a time when hatred and division still rise in the world, remembering Ravensbrück is not just about honoring the past, it's about protecting the future. The forest around the camp has grown quiet again. Birds sing where once there were screams. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of the women who refused to give up their humanity. Their names may have been forgotten by the world for a time, but their courage never will be. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more forgotten histories from around the world. Every voice we remember keeps their memory alive and ensures that the darkness of the past is never repeated.